In other news, NATO foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels today. Speaking there, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he was confident the United States would keep up weapons deliveries to Ukraine, despite a political blockage in Washington.
We see intense fighting along the front line, and we have seen waves of drone attacks against Ukrainian cities, and we need to be prepared for more fighting and also more air and missile attacks against Ukrainian cities. This just makes it even more important that NATO allies continue to support Ukraine. I expect also at the meeting that allies will reiterate their strong support to Ukraine. We'll also meet with Foreign Minister Kuleba.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in our Brussels correspondent, Dave Keating. Dave, Stoltenberg's comments come at a time when support for Ukraine is wavering. How much is that going to be coloring today's meeting?
It's definitely the elephant in the room today. This is the first time the foreign ministers have come together in this format since the big Vilnius summit of NATO country leaders over the summer. And since then, of course, we've had the outbreak of the Israel-Palestine war, but we've also had the lack of success of Ukraine's summer offensive. And all of that has fed into fear that Ukraine is falling off the agenda, that support for Ukraine in the West is wavering. We've seen Republicans blocking aid to Ukraine in Washington. We've seen Hungary's Viktor Orban here in Brussels blocking 500 million in military aid to Ukraine and also 50 billion in long-term aid from the EU. He's demanding a discussion before he would sign off on that, on really whether the EU should be continuing to arm Ukraine. Then we've had victories recently for candidates in Slovakia, in the Netherlands, who want the West to end support for Ukraine and who have been friendly with Russian President Vladimir Putin. It is not a good time for this alliance. And certainly the foreign ministers today at NATO will be keen to demonstrate that their commitment to Ukraine is unwavering. And that's what we saw there from NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg as he was entering just about 2 hours ago, but he's putting a brave face on a bad situation. It is certainly true that Ukraine has fallen off the agenda. We saw that last month when Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a surprise visit to NATO here in Brussels. His first time doing so. If he had done that 1 month earlier, it would have probably gotten a lot of attention, but because it came just shortly after October 7th, of course, the world's attention was still very much focused on the Israel-Palestine conflict. That is the difficulty that the Ukrainian foreign minister will find himself in today, how to put this back on the agenda.
Right. So the Ukraine issue, the big elephant in the room, as you say. What are the other big issues that are going to be on the table today?
Well, Secretary General Stoltenberg was also hoping that today Sweden would become officially a member of NATO. He expressed his disappointment coming in this morning that will not be the case because Turkey is dragging its feet on ratifying Sweden's NATO membership. Of course, they had reached a deal with Turkey that they said they were going to pass it, but since then they have been being very slow on that. Also problems in Hungary. So there's definite disgruntlement, let's say, about that, but he put a kind of brave face on it this morning. They're also going to be talking about relations with China. Stoltenberg said he wouldn't describe China as an enemy, but he said there are concerns for NATO about China's growing strength in the Asia-Pacific region. They're also going to be talking about Iran launching attacks via proxies in the region and the threat that Iran might pose to the West. Lots of other issues to discuss today, some of them related to Ukraine, some of them not, but of course then in the background you have the Israeli-Palestine conflict. It's not going to be directly discussed today. It's not yet any kind of NATO mission, any kind of NATO competence, but certainly that is the conflict that is informing all others and will certainly be informing their discussion of Iran.